Just go on the fly. Welcome, everybody, to I'm Gonna Ask Dad, a new podcast coming out by myself, Dad.
And me.
Well, what's your name?
How do you know I'm comfortable sharing that?
Maybe you're not. That's fine.
Yeah. See, the entire theme of this is
It's tough sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, we do not know what... We don't know what others have lived through, so why do we judge them for?
The idea is that Evan wants to ask me some questions about some pretty big topics, and just sharing some perspective with him in what it's like to live in the adult world, I think maybe would probably be the best way I can say I'm going to answer your questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And I know you want to go big today. Like you want.
Yeah, we're starting with the...
You started with a
We're
banger of
starting
a
with
topic.
the 2024 presidential election. Because, like...
It just happened, hey?
Yeah, it just happened, so...
Well, what do you think about it?
What I think about it is... It's too much of a landslide to have been rigged in any way.
Interesting thoughts. All right, what questions do you have for me about it, though?
Question 1. Why was the reaction to Trump's win in the election so... Why was the left's reaction so volatile, for lack of a better word?
You know, I don't see volatility.
Emotional.
Emotional. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good word for it. I don't know what anybody's life's like, but here's something I've learned last week. The first day after the election, I really enjoyed videos of like meltdowns. But a couple days later, I was like, I remember. Here's a good anecdote for you. In 7th grade, I was on a basketball team. So I was your age, right?
Yes.
I was on a basketball team.
Correct.
And there was 1 second left on the clock. I got fouled shooting a shot. I did not make the shot. I had 2 free throws. I missed both of them. Not only did I have the chance to win the game, but also I missed the first one. I then had the chance to tie the game, and I let my team down. And it was one of the biggest emotional things I went through at that point in time. So I came to the point where I realized that these folks in these videos having these meltdowns, it was similar to that experience for me, right? They're on a team that they were hoping would win, and they didn't win. So it's when you're really set on winning, it's a big emotional thing that you can go through if it's not what you were hoping it would be. Especially, I mean, there was so much talk about how close it was, and you said landslide. I don't know that I'd say landslide. I go back and I look at like, what is it, Reagan's 1980 win, where it was all but like one state voted red. Even California voted red for Ronald Reagan back in the 80s. Like, that was a landslide. It was like 400 something to like 13.
Yeah, but given how absolute a lot of the states are, I consider him having done as good as he did a landslide. That's where
Fair.
My train of thought comes from.
I think what's more interesting is how much, like, everywhere shifted right in terms of percentage of local or state voting. I know there's quite a few counties as well. There was a huge shift towards the right voting. What else you got about the election, man?
What else I have?
Yeah.
Do you think there was any foreign interference?
Foreign interference. I think we live in a world we have to be really careful with the information we take in.
Yes, and that is why I'm asking this question, because a lot of people don't have those... I'm trying not... I was about to say something.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot to silence my cell phone. I'm gonna remember that for next time.
We all make mistakes. We're all human.
I think that's honestly, as we're doing this, I think that's going to be the biggest thing, is recognizing that everyone is human, because we forget that a lot. Like, yeah, those of us, the folks that voted for Donald Trump are, it's a victory lap at the moment. But good sportsmanship includes going over and congratulating the other team and being there to support them for their loss. Because if you've been on a losing team, you know what a loss feels like. So hopefully name calling goes away and we get back to, like, I think you and I have talked about this, where we've talked about, like, how can people just have a conversation
Like we are having right now.
like you and I are having right now. And, I know I've encouraged you pretty regularly to think for yourself, to not, you know, I know I try to listen to several different sources of information, but I encourage you, like, gain information and make decisions for yourself. Think critically and freely for the things you want to think about and the way you want to live your life. Um, yeah, interference. It feels like it could have been out there, but people were less inclined to quickly jump into it. So I've been on social media for a long time, right? There was there was a point in time, Facebook, you could only have and be friends with people in your college. And when you were in high school, you couldn't even have Facebook. That's how old I am, right? So
Yeah.
I've been on social media for a long time, and what I've seen is it got to the point where people only read the headlines and didn't get any information. And then it became, you have to at least click on the headline because it's clickbaity. Like, even local TV stations I've seen do this, where the notification you get from their app is really clickbaity so that you can have more information. But I think what you've seen is people kind of recognizing that we can't form an informed opinion off of headlines. So people are investigating further rather than. So did interference exist? Probably. Was there foreign interference? I think that's just a dictate of the world stage, that that's something that's likely being done. But think uh, I think the citizenry has grown up in a way of, like, okay, we don't need to just listen to everything, the headlines. We can have, we can dig into it a little more, or sit down. My biggest thing is sit down with somebody that has a different viewpoint and talk to them. Are you still in camera? Is that what you're checking out?
Yeah. First time. Dude, you gotta check that kind of stuff.
The biggest thing is, like, think about it not being there, right? Like, that's not there. The camera's not there. The microphone's not there. It's just, think about the conversation you and I had last night. How great was that conversation? And I was like, dang, we should have had everything recording.
Yeah.
All right. So you've asked about interference. You've asked about emotionality. What else have you seen?
What else have I seen?
Or what other questions might you have?
Alright. Well, one question I have is, why is the left? How do I say this? Why has the left been doing all the name calling that they have been doing, including during the first time Trump ran?
Specifically about Trump?
Yeah.
So I think that, hey, a lot of noise for the mic to pick up. I think that question leads to, I think, the greater point of what you approached me about this podcast for, right? That brings about the idea of, just like I was making with the team and sports analogy, is we have a different perspective of life. You've not lived my life,
Yeah.
right? Like I was just saying about social, I've been on social media longer than you've been alive. You've not lived my life.
Mhm.
That's literally true of every other human being on this planet. You've not lived their life, they've not lived your life. So if you believe somebody is something and you think that that is an evil, wouldn't you call it out for that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah.
So, if I think, hmm, I don't want to go too deep down a religious rabbit hole, but let's say, of a Christian faith, I believe somebody's sinning. Well, that's an evil in that faith, that's sin. Would you not say something to them, or would you say something to them?
Realistically, I would.
Would you tell people like, "Hey, this is the way away from that"?
Yeah, if I was a Christian, I would.
It's a very difficult thing because you might see it as loving, right?
But another
But they
person might see it as,
they might see it as hatred. They
yeah,
might see you attacking them for something they think is right in their life, but you're trying to say a truth of your own life. That's why I don't want, like I said, I don't want to dive down the rabbit hole, but that's why I tell you and your sister when we do go to church, like what my belief is and why I attend the church I attend, and how my faith isn't necessarily that of the church we attend. I appreciate the message that that church does give out. Um, but as for name calling, I think again, if you see something that you truly believe is evil, I think you should speak to that, and I think that is what you should do, and I think that's what you see. I think people honestly believe that, and then you have other people that honestly don't. Again, it's going to be because of two very different worlds that those people have lived in. Because if let's say the economy is a great one for this election cycle, the people, I think the numbers broke down where people making over $100,000 or more a year generally voted for Kamala Harris. People that made less than that generally voted for Donald Trump. Um, and I think the reason in that is if you make over $100,000 a year, the price of groceries didn't really pinch your pocketbook, right? How many times do I talk about how tight I have to be with our food budget, with our gas budget? How many times do I mention that to you of like, we're not going to have the money for this thing or that thing because of how tight the budget is?
yeah,
I don't make the kind of money that it didn't matter to me if butter is twice as expensive as it used to be. I'm making the same amount as I was when butter was half the price it is now. And butter is something I buy almost every week. So that one product has doubled the expenditure for me. So I've got to find ways to, do with less or different
cut back,
recipes, cut back
cut
or
back on spending
yep.
on other things.
So for the people in those lower earning brackets, the economy was a massive deal. So I think that is one of those things where yeah, there was the what somebody saw as evil, but there was others that saw good because they remembered the economy being different under Donald Trump. And you could go all day about whose policies did what to the economy. Like you could go through everything and we're not going to have a great answer. And people could argue back and forth, left and right, all day long about who did what for the economy that changed what and when. At the end of the day, people remembered what the economy was under Donald Trump, and then they remembered what the economy was under Joe Biden. So there were very stark differences in the feeling in the people's lives. And it again, you get that somebody sees good or evil or positive negative in their life because of the life experience they have. not necessarily because of what somebody else says. When somebody tells me that the economy's good, I have a hard time believing it because I'm still spending a ton of money on butter. What do you mean the economy's good? So that's, I think, where you get into that name calling and that discussion of perspective and good and evil. I think that's what you see. Do I think name calling is what we need? No, and it wasn't just the left. There was name calling from the right as well, right? I think it's a base of humans for whatever reason, and it's something that I'd like to see us grow away from because we don't know what's going on in somebody's life. So why call them a name? And why not sit down and go, tell me why you think that? Why do you think? I would guess you're referencing the fact that Donald Trump has been being called a racist and a Nazi for so long.
Yes, that is what I am
Right?
referencing.
Okay. You know, I've I've tried a couple times with a few people that I know to sit and like tell me why you think that. Um and it's very, when you go into that conversation recognizing that they have a different perspective of life and you can listen to that. I'll take the Nazi one for example, right? Hitler. That was said quite a bit. If you watch the history of Hitler, Hitler came to power because of, okay, this is my layman's understanding of it. Let's put it that way. I don't know the intricacies of it, but to my understanding, the economy was really shot. The people of Germany were fed up with what was happening. So he came to power saying, this is how we're going to fix it. And he blamed, ultimately, I don't know if it was in his, winning speeches or whatever it was, ultimately the blame was on the Jews. Again, this is my understanding. I could be wildly off on this.
Yeah.
But this is my understanding of it. And when you listen to some of Donald Trump's speeches, if you go in thinking somebody thinks this man is Hitler, and you look at what Hitler was, and you watch the speeches, I can see where people think that.
Except instead of Jews, it's immigrants.
Yes and no.
Ah.
There's it's a blame game, right? Like, this is the problem. And I think immigration is one we wrote down for a completely different episode, so we'll save the nuances of that, right? But the bigger driving is that impact of the economic life of people. The economy. If people are struggling and suffering to live, then they're going to look for somebody that's going to say, we're going to fix this. They're going to look for somebody that says, what's been isn't working for you. I have a different vision and I'm going to fix it for you. People are going to flock to that. And I think that's what you saw. So when people say he's Hitler, if you watch speeches trying to understand their perspective, you can see that. Like, I've tried it myself. I've gone in and I've listened as if I believe this man is comparable to Hitler, and I can see where that is what the speech is. So it's a wild time we live in, and I think the biggest thing it comes down to is inform yourself with as much factual information as possible. And if you aren't sure it's factual, either dig into it and find out for yourself, or let go of it. And it's not something you need to worry yourself with. Like, if it's something that's not necessarily going to affect your life, is it something you need to put the energy into? Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to live our lives, right? Like, that's what it is. What else you got?
Here's one I have. Do you think that wait, I just need a bit more information. How much do doctors make on average per year?
We could look that up after the episode, but I would imagine, depending on the doctor, at least over $100,000, and I would imagine some high performing doctors in widely sought after fields or very specific skill sets. Um, I don't know, but I imagine that there are doctors out there that make millions. Would be my guess, but we can look up after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the percentage of? How do you think the overturning of federal protections on? How do you think doctors took the overturning of overturning the federal protections on abortion and bringing it the power into the states?
How do the doctors take it?
Yeah.
Um, it's a really good question. I've not heard anything about doctors on that, and that would be one I'd have to see if I can find a doctor that would share their opinion with me.
But how do you imagine they?
How do I imagine it?
Yeah. But I'm gonna take everything with a grain of salt because you don't live the life of a doctor.
Right. I'm trying to put myself in a doctor's shoes. If that was what I did for a living, I don't know, because it's really hard to pull my own belief structure out and then imagine I'm a doctor. If I had to say, that's a tough one to talk to, because I have my own belief structure, and that's going to get in the way of trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes without actually hearing the story of somebody else's shoes.
Yeah, but I imagine that most of the doctors were against Trump this election because abortion's part of their job and they really don't want to see it overturned, and because that means that means less people would be able to go over to them, which means the hospitals would be making much less, which means they may have to take wait.
But at the same time, the doctor's Hippocratic oath begins with first, do no harm. So if you have a doctor that believes he's harming a baby in that field, fetus, baby, whatever you want to say to that, a doctor that believes that that is a baby from conception isn't necessarily going to be disappointed in losing money for himself if he believes that the human life had more value than his salary. So again, it's a very hard thing. And abortion is a topic we have written for a whole episode too.
Yeah.
Like we'll dive into that one later.
Yeah. Kind of just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Just like with immigration, like we did earlier.
Yep.
Like it's about the election, and all these fall under.
Right, and I think that's you and I talked last night. That's why we want to kind of do this, because there are so many big topics, and I think that's the the crux of what we want to do here is talk about it. You and I are of two different generations. You're growing up in a world of electronics I never even had, right?
Yes.
So I don't understand what it's like to grow up in the world you're growing up in, because I shared with you last night, even to support you in this mission that you put together with wanting to do a podcast, I'm afraid I don't know how to be a supportive father, because I never felt like I had a supportive father. He supported me in the things he wanted me to do, but I didn't feel like he supported me in the things I wanted to do. So I don't understand what it's like to have a father, or how to be a father that supports you in something you want to do. And I think your mission here to show that it's okay to talk about difficult things, and to share and show that the best thing you can do is go learn a new perspective. I know I told you last night, your mother and I are very proud of that insight. Like, it's a gorgeous thing. But that's that's the start of, the election was a really good example of it's over. Let's reach across with an olive branch and get back to recognizing one another are human. Um, we've seen people throw friends out of their lives because of the way they voted. And to me, it's just so bizarre because I want to know if I had somebody that said, I can't believe you voted different than me and attacked me for it, I would want to sit down with them and say, tell me why you voted the way you voted. Like, don't attack me. Share with me your life experience that led you to the way you voted. Because then I might understand the world a little differently and maybe come to the table and agree with you. Doesn't mean I have to, because I have a life experience all my own that led me to the path I was on. So let's sit, let's talk. And I think that, that's the mission you wanted to put together here is it's okay to sit and talk about these topics. I remember growing up, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about money, you don't talk about sex. It's the other one. I feel like there's 4 or 5 things. Like, you don't talk about these things. And I feel like that was really kind of the crux of what broke in the world of information. We didn't talk about those things. Like, that mentality of don't talk about those things carried over, so we didn't talk about it. Or if we did, there was no threat of violence on the internet, so people said whatever the hell they wanted and got angry at each other. Because what was going to happen? If you yell in all caps on the internet, it's not like somebody's going to punch you.
Yeah, the closest thing you have to that is just posting a string of number. You're right. Is just finding the person's IP address somehow.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like,
Don't gotta stop doxing each other over politics.
yeah, just I think if people come together and understand that you have lived a completely different life. There's actually a word for that. You know this one?
What?
I had it was really cool. It's 2 or 3 weeks ago now at the Black Rocks. I had an interaction with a young college student. She was going for therapy, is her major. I think she said it was her senior year. And I asked her, I said, well, what's the most profound thing you've learned about? What was the thing that like changed your life? And she said it's intersectionality, which is, I'm going to flub up the actual education piece of this, but generally the way I understood what she told me is that it's the realization that everyone's life is just as complicated as your own. You know, an African American man is going to have a very different experience in America than I am. That's just a plain fact. Maybe not all the time. I don't know, right? But everybody's life, because of where they start, is different. And just not even where they start. Everybody's life is different. Period. Is the only way to sum that up. Everybody's life is completely different, and we don't know about it if we don't talk about it. How failable is it that when somebody says how you doing, and your answer is I'm good? What did we really learn about one another?
Not much. It's just
What if
it's all.
go ahead.
It's just always it's a common greeting that people in this culture use. It's almost it's lost all of its meaning now.
When I ask somebody how they're doing, I'm genuinely interested in what's going on in your day, what's going on in your week, what's going on in your life. Share some of your weight and burden with me. Because at the end of the day, your weight isn't going to be heavy on my shoulders. Right? It's not my burden to carry. But if sharing it with me helped you, if it made that weight a little easier for you to carry because you talked about it, I would love to do that for somebody. Now, I might not have all day to have, a 4-hour conversation, but man, I've had a shit day. My car won't start. I've got this, I've got that. And if I can go, I've had a day like that before, man. It fucking sucks.
What?
I'll have to mark it that there's explicit language in our podcast.
Ouch. Well, shit.
But back to the election. Do you have any other questions, or has anything come up that you want to dig in a little more on?
No, not really. Do you have any questions that you might want answered from my perspective?
Ooh. So you aren't old enough to vote.
I'm aware.
No, I know. What is it like watching the world? Because I remember adults talking about election politics, but not really not to the degree of the fighting that you saw in this election or the last couple of elections. But this one, you're old enough to really kind of you've been paying attention and acknowledging what's happening. What is it like to know that the adults are making this decision and you don't have a voice in it right now?
Honestly, kind of annoying, but I respect it because my brain is not fully developed yet, and I might not be able to make I would not be able to make as educated of a decision as some of the other as the adults voting.
It's a tricky thing, right? Because you're certainly. I mean, I get to interact with you every day, dude.
I'm talking about I shouldn't say myself. That's gonna make me feel bad, but the majority of people my age are.
May I?
Yeah.
You are very politically knowledgeable. You do a lot of things to pay attention and inform yourself on what's happening in the world, which is not a typical trait of somebody your age.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly an accurate thing. I don't I remember hating having to do current events. I hated it. But you have had a very big interest for a long time in what's happening in the world. And I've really enjoyed watching you kind of do that. So, to speak for yourself, how, yeah, speak for yourself on it. What's it like watching adults fight over this decision, having worked to gain the knowledge you've gained for yourself?
Honestly, sometimes it can be very funny.
Fair enough.
Seeing the reaction from the left, it's just absolutely hilarious.
But remember, they're living a life.
I'm aware.
And that was, I don't know if I said it earlier, because it's stuck in my algorithm, these meltdown videos and compilations, I don't even watch them anymore because I know that feeling. I'm a little disgusted with myself that I was, for the first 2 days was really enjoying that. I don't need to feel that way because that's not a good sportsmanship path. And that's not the kind of man I want to be. So it was a recognition on my part of hey, here's an area of growth that's important for you to start taking because it's important to you to take it. I think that's something I've learned in the last couple of years too, is accountability for myself to be the person I want to be. Because how would I feel if I was having an emotional reaction to the election and somebody was making fun of me? Not that I said a lot of negative things about them, but I watched them and laughed at some of them. But you take that step back and you recognize that you're not looking at the world through their perception. And it for me, it made me grow up a little bit in the way I wanted to grow up. Anybody in school talk about politics? Nobody in your class is oh yeah, I can't believe this is happening?
No.
That doesn't surprise me for the grade you're in. I think that's really the only question I have for you on what this election cycle was like.
Uh,
Got anything else?
no.
Well, I'm gonna ask Dad. And like, follow, subscribe, follow us on Facebook. You've got a link there to find all of our pages, and listen to us or check us out on YouTube or Spotify, I think is where we're at the moment. Thanks for joining us.
Or not, I don't care.